Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Perfherder Live Hacking. This week I'm going to look into something on the back end of Perfherder as opposed to the front end like I did a few months ago. Um, so let's just get right into it. This is an issue that I'm going to try to solve an issue that's been kind of bothering us for a while. Just to give you some background, we have a test, performance type test that runs on every Linux build that tries to measure the number of static constructors that would be instantiated every time Firefox starts. So a static constructor, as far as I understand it anyway, would be a static C++ object that just gets instantiated when Firefox starts. And we don't want too many of these because instantiating each object takes a bunch of time, and then that would slow down everything else that you would want to happen when you start Firefox. So it's better if you don't need something right away to lazily construct it. So this test is just designed to make sure that number doesn't get out of control. But where it goes wrong is that there's kind of inevitably when you change Firefox that this number will bounce up and down a little bit. So what happens is that we have a pile of alerts since the threshold is set to 1 of just this number changing in kind of uninteresting ways. And it's too much for the performance sheriffs to manage, which means that de facto we kind of just wind up treating this metric as noise. So we kind of want to fix that, right? So that's what this bug is about. Set threshold for num-static constructor alerts to 3. So this is actually a little bit more complicated than you would think because right now we do performance alerts based on percentage change. And we sort of hack things up to get a threshold of 1 just by setting the percentage really, really super low. It's possible, of course, that we could just set the percentage somewhat higher to catch 2 or 3, which is what we want the number to be, but then if the number changes in the future and the ratio gets out of whack, then it's going to break again. So I think what we actually want to do is we want to allow Perfherder to alert in some cases based on absolute change rather than just percentage changed. And I even define exactly what needs to happen for this for this change to go into effect. So basically this is what we're going to do is we're going to modify Perfherder to let submitters to Perfherder say that they want to alert on an absolute value of change. And then once that's in place, we'll just modify the number of constructor performance submissions to say that they want to alert on that threshold. Okay, so let's just get right into it. So obviously it's we need to do the foundational work before anything else can happen. So 14 days ago, I kind of tried to think out what I needed to do. So I said, I believe there's 3 steps to this. Okay, so first, modify the schema to support an alert change type property for suite. An enumeration with types percent and absolute, default should be percent. Also modify the description of alert threshold to remove the reference to percent. So I actually provided a handy link to that. So this is a schema which just defines what's a legitimate performance artifact that people can submit to Perfherder. Basically, this is just an enforcement mechanism. So we can say that if people put invalid values or invalid data in this, then we can just reject it really quickly. And this is often something that you would want to use on the client side before you submit to something to Perfherder just to validate that your data is correct. So changing this won't actually enable anything. It will just enable us to enable something, if that makes any sense. So let's just dive in here and look at that. So schemas, performance artifact.json. Yeah, this is used as a standard called JSONSchema, which is pretty cool. I recommend looking it up. We use it a lot, both in Treeherder and in the task cluster build automation system that we're moving to for validating all sorts of things. So it makes stuff like this a lot easier. All right, so here we go. Here's the performance schema. You see, oh right, so we have each Perfherder blob of performance data has both a suite level result and a subtest level result, and I think unfortunately we're kind of duplicating them, which is kind of annoying. It would actually be possible not to duplicate stuff, but of course that's kind of another bug. So, okay, so anyway, these are actually all alerting properties. So lower is better, should alert, whether we should alert at all, the threshold for the alert. This is one of the things that we're going to need to change, or at least we'll change the description. Min back window, yeah, this defines kind of parameters for the statistical formula that we use. So, okay, so what did we think? Alert change type. Okay, so it probably belongs somewhere like here. I never really understand the distinction between title and description. I guess description is just longer. So this is, I think, this is going to be, in JSON schema you can have something called an enumeration, but I don't actually remember, which is what we want here, right? Because we want to be able to say absolute or percentage, but if somebody says alert change type foobar, which we don't understand, we want to bring out some sort of error. Here we go. So here's a description. Okay, so enum type. This is a job action message. I think this is some legacy thing, but it has a little piece of data that we want to use. So let's just use it. Okay, that's good. I think, yeah, I think it's actually possible to specify a default in a JSON schema, but because we kind of want to do a default of percentage, but actually it doesn't really matter since we're kind of weak on enforcing the schema, and we just say that if we just have some defaults in Perfherder, and if something isn't specified, then we default to the sensible thing. In this case, we'll default to percentage, which was the old thing, because I think only some people, well, at first only this particular test will define the change type in terms of absolute. Okay, so we'll go do that. And because we're not using the form in JSON schema that lets you define something like this once and then use it in multiple places, we'll just repeat that code here. Oh yeah, and we'll want to, yeah, so we need to change the alert threshold. So before we had some constants that were meant to make things sane, but I think we'll just take, yeah, I don't know whether it makes sense to actually define anything anymore, because it really could be, I don't know if it really ever, well, we can say that there's a minimum of 0.0 since we're using an absolute value, but we'll just take away the maximum. That could be wrong. I don't really know. Okay, good. Okay, so we've updated the schema. Okay, and then we need to ingest the alert change type in the ETL code. Okay, so, right. So I believe this actually also means that we'll need to change the model of a performance series in Perfherder so that it understands this concept. So should alert, yeah, all right. Oh, this is going to be fun. Okay, so we need to define the enumeration here as well. So we'll probably base that. We have a few enumerations in Django here, which I'll just copy. So we'll do like alert thresholds percentage equals 0, alert thresholds absolute value equals 1. And actually, instead of threshold, let's just say alert. And then what did I say? Alert change type. I'm not sure if I like that name, but we'll go with it for now. Okay. So we're using an integer field, which will boil down to an integer in MySQL, but we'll restrict it to this set of values that we defined here. Percentage. Alert on absolute value. All right. Yeah, maybe we'll put this below. Traces, alert change types. Default equals alert on percentage. Okay, so that's good stuff. So now we have the capability of storing this in the database model, but we'll also want to modify the ETL code to actually ingest it. So let's take a look at that. I said that I should be doing it around line 87. Right, okay. Alert change type, sweet get alert change type. Oh, but we need to translate. Ah, so frustrating. Okay. How should we do that? We need to do some sort of mapping. Well, I guess we'll just, in the absence of a better, I'm really not happy about that. This feels kind of ugly. But, I mean, the thing is that we need to do this operation twice. If we needed to do it once, it'd be easy. But it probably makes sense to use a function. Well, anyway, this is offending my personal sense of aesthetics, but sometimes you just need to get over that, right? So we might think of a better idea later. Okay, so if alert change type equals percentage, return actually. So here's where here's where you figure out a smarter way of doing things while you're doing it. So for so yeah. I'm just trying to make this fit into a string. Yeah. Schema. It's not really a schema. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. Da, da, da. Hmm. All right. So this is pretty silly, but I feel like and in fact, let's be kind of clever and put this in this function in case we ever need to use it in the future. Call it a static method. And yeah, and then we don't have to do this. No, it doesn't like this. Now it's just complaining about line too long. Okay, time is passing, and all people are getting out of this is that I'm a perfectionist. It's not too great to be too much of a perfectionist. So, okay, let's get back to work. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that now. So where were we? We were looking at something to do with relating to suites, weren't we? Lower is better, should alert. Aha, okay. So performance signature, get alert change type. I think that should work pretty well. Okay, and then we'll also so much duplication here between suites and subtests. It would be nice if we could remove some of that duplication. Okay, so that looks all right. Sometimes it's nice to do just a quick sanity check when you've done something like this before doing anything more. So you saw that we actually changed the Django database model here. So when you do that, you also need to create a schema migration so that Django knows to add the column to the table. So let's do that. And you should name the schema after the thing that's changed. So we'll do that. Oh, see, this is why it's good to test your code. I think, yeah, we just badly indented something. Okay, good. Okay, that looks great. So I was thinking, yeah. So there's a few tests in testctl which would be relevant here. We're obviously not testing the new functionality, but like sometimes when you run unit tests like this, you know, at least it's testing that the old stuff works, and that can uncover bugs more quickly. I mean, I found, you know, in working on Perfherder that it's, or really any software project, right? Like you try to do a little bit of a small thing and then test whether that still works, and then add more and more and more. Otherwise, you know, you know, if you spend like a day or, you know, even just a few hours, you know, adding all this functionality, and you'll just, the human mind just isn't capable of doing everything right on the first try, and you'll just find this huge pile of errors. And see, like, look right there. There's a bunch of unit tests that failing. Oh, okay. So column alert change type cannot be null. It's very angry about that. Okay. Oh, and you know why that is? It's because, oh no. I was gonna, oh, Okay, so this is confusing. Why is it erroring out this way? Because we set a default. So by default, it should be alerting on percentage. Why is it complaining about something being null? Oh, because we're... Okay, right. So it would have been okay if we had... Okay, so what's happening is that we're specifying alert change type as a default parameter to this update or create function, and then we're passing the value of this, and then if we didn't specify it, then we're just going to return... Oh, well, there's an error right there. But if we didn't specify anything, we return none, which means that we're explicitly telling it to use a null value for this, which is not what we want. We want to default to alert on percentage. I mean, I guess we could use null if we wanted to, on the code level, default to percentage if the column was null, but which would have some advantages, but I'm kind of feeling that what we want here is just something like this. I think this is right. So yeah, I mean in MySQL you can specify a column can be null or not null. It's generally I find it's better unless a null value actually makes sense, for some reason to insist that it be specified, because in that sense MySQL can sort of make things explicit for you and guarantee data integrity. All right, let's see if that fixes stuff. I think it should. Yeah, I think that worked. So next step, use a threshold in the code which actually generates alerts, right? So now we're storing this property, but we're not actually using it for anything. So let's take care of that. So so the Perfherder alerting code, what it does is it takes a range of data. Every time a new piece of data is added, it takes a range of data from the last time an alert was generated, and then takes a forward window and a backward window, and it tries to find points where the forward data is qualitatively different from the previous data, and it does this via this statistical concept called a t-test. And actually the judgment that the data is qualitatively different is actually distinct from alerting thresholds. So it's actually, we kind of set by default, I think, a minimum change of 2%, but tests can override this. In the case of the number of constructors test, we actually set the threshold rather low, like I think less than 1%, just to alert every time the value changed. And it was like, since number of constructors isn't really a noisy metric, it's basically constant. If the code stays constant, it was pretty reliable, but we just want to set the threshold differently. So let's see here, get alert properties. No, that's not what we want. Generate new alerts in series, this is what we want. If alert threshold is none. Okay. Let's see here. So it's where we're using the threshold. Right. So here's where we need. Okay. So if signature dot alert change type equals performance signature. Alert on percentage. And I'm not so happy with this. This is kind of a long line. But what can you do? Well, maybe sometimes you just have to continue on. Okay. Type equals performance signature dot alert on absolute value. And alert properties. Yeah, it's delta. Is less than alert threshold. Then continue. So, okay, this is kind of awful, right? Really the problem, so this line is too long. And I think Django has some methods for getting shortened versions of these properties. I don't know. But regardless, I think this code works. I'll clean it up later. Because yeah, it's just not very nice for the person reading the code to have to look at these really, really long lines. But it's at the same time, where time runs short, this is the sort of thing that I can clean up later. If you're interested, maybe I'll post a comment on the YouTube video posting to a patch where I clean this up in some way or another. Okay, so we've got that done. I think this is done. I think this is it. I think this should be everything we need to make this make this feature work. So the only remaining thing to do is to actually add some unit tests, both to validate that this existing code works and also to make sure that it doesn't break in the future, which is super important. Okay, so here's some. What these tests do is they generate a series of performance data, and then they try to find and then we try to find alerts in them. Let's see. Right. So like, for example, this one generates a bunch of performance data with a value of 0.5 and then a bunch with 1.0. So I guess for absolute values, we would want to test that, say, with something like this, right? Like, let's say that we set an absolute value of 0.25 as being the threshold for change. We could test we could test this, and this shouldn't alert. Um, So we could either parameterize this test so that we would add something on top to say, oh, okay, let's test this, with the existing percentage threshold change, or, let's test it with the new one. But I think that's just, in this case, we would have to vary so much between the two cases that it's probably easier for people to understand if we just generate some new test cases. So I think we should be able to do a unit test case. So test alert change type absolute. I think more or less we're going to use the same parameters as above. Okay. Actually, now that I think about it, I just violated my own rule. Let's just take this out for a second and do a quick test just to make sure that this function just still works, even with the changes that I just made. Yep, okay, good. Yeah, we didn't really change that much, so it's not too surprising. Okay, so the alert change type should be performance signature alert on absolute value. Test perf signature dot alert threshold. .25. Actually, let's use a parameter. Let's parameterize this in two ways. One, let's generate one series with an absolute threshold that should result in an alert being generated, and one that shouldn't. So we'll keep the alert threshold the same as 0.25, but let's say we can generate it once with, say, 0.5 to 0.6, which shouldn't, and then 0.5 to 1.0, which should. I think that'll be a pretty nice test. So since I'm 37 and I can't remember anything anymore, yeah, PyTest mark parameterized. Let's find a nice one. Da, da, da. I like the look of the one. should alert should be one of the parameters, and then new value. Okay. Right, okay, so you specify a tuple, which indicates the things that should vary between runs, and then array of values for that tuple. So, okay, so as we said, 1.0 at 0.25, that should alert true, and then 0.25 false. All right, good stuff. Where's that? Yep, okay. Okay, but we just need to import PyTest up here. We need to add performance signature to the list of models that we import. All right. Okay. Oh. It's just easier because then we can just use, if we specify the number of alerts that we expect to be generated, what we can do is instead of having some sort of if clause, if blah, 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 then I expect 1, and then if not, then I expect this. We can just, instead of having an if else, we can just do expected num alerts. And then, oh yes, and one other thing I forgot to mention is that if you use this parameterize thing in PyTest, you would also need to specify it there. So, okay, I think pretty simple stuff, right? Oh, we need to save this guy. Let's just be... All right. Okay, that's pretty simple. Tests, perf alert, test create alerts. Let's see how that works. Oh, it's failing. Why are you failing? Okay, which one? So on a threshold of 0.25, it is generating an alert when we didn't expect it to be. Oh, well, that's not very handy, is it? Let's set it at... Okay, so we set the new value to be 1.0. Yeah, okay. So let's set it at 0.3. Because I think the error that I made is that I set all this fancy stuff up to set as a new value of 0.25, and we set the alert threshold at, which was the exact same as the alert threshold. So of course it meets it, so it's not going to alert. I don't know. That's my hypothesis. Let's try running these tests again and see if that hypothesis is confirmed. Nope. Okay, it's still erroring. Still generating an alert where we don't feel like it should. Okay, but we're saying alert on absolute value. Oh, well, it would be helpful if I actually set the new value, wouldn't it? Let's try this. So now we should be generating one set of performance data with a value of 0.5, one set with a value of 1.0 in the first case where we do expect an alert, the other 0.25 in the case where we don't expect an alert. Let's see if that works. Yep, that works. Okay, great. Okay, I'm just going to assume that this is good then. In practice, I'm going to do some other testing on this code just to make sure that it works properly offline after this live coding exercise. But that part, the tree herder part, is looking pretty good to me. So but remember though that this only enables the capability of alerting on sort of a different kind of threshold. So let's see. We would also need to modify the in-tree code, which generates the number of constructors data to specify this new parameter. So okay, so that's that. We're just looking at the tree herder bug to enable this. Let's look at the in-tree bug for num constructors. I think we can just search Fox is awesome. Nope. Oh, of course, constructor is like the most common word in the world. Okay, let's see here. Alerts, Perfherder alerts, compiler metrics, num constructors. Okay, okay. Well, okay. How about compiler metrics? That's kind of. There we go. Okay. So this is it. Count C towards. Oh, okay. You see. So in this file, you see that we're setting this compiler metrics thing, and the value, count CTORs, num static constructors, and the alert threshold of 0.25. So really, I think all we need to do is, assuming that we have a version of Perfherder which has the changes that I mentioned, and those changes are working correctly, all we would need to do is modify Mozilla Central. To emit the information in the correct format. So let's take a look at that. Build, util, count CTORs. So I guess just for those who don't know, basically how Perfherder works most of the time is that in your test job that you want to emit performance data, you just put a log line that says Perfherder data that has the schema that I outlined at the very beginning of this session. And you put the information and the values that you want in it. So I guess like if you really want to get right down to it, let's say here, this guy here. Is it build jobs that have the number of constructors? Let's see. Yeah, no. Yeah. So okay, so that code that I just showed, it actually boils down here to emit this value called num static constructors right here. It's part of a Linux build job. So Perfherder it parses each log file to pick up various types of data, including this one, and then it will put this data in the database and associate it with this job and that revision and yada, yada, yada. So Okay, so we want to change the alert threshold to 3. That was what Nathan Freud, Joel Mara, and I decided would be a reasonable threshold, because that should eliminate most of the churn, but still alert us if somebody chucked in a change which added a ton of static constructors inadvertently. And then also, we would want to modify this guy to have an alert change type of absolute. Okay, good. Actually, that just brought up a good point, which is that we don't actually have any code inside Perfherder or inside the tree herder to test that this alert change type property of a Perfherder blob is processed correctly, right? So in the ETL code that we modified at the very beginning, we made sure to modify the database model or set it if it was being created the first time to have this type of alert change type. And we don't have any code to test that that's set appropriately. So I think to do that, I think this has kind of gone on long enough, so I'm going to stop, but without doing it. But I think perf data adapters. Yeah, so like we have a bunch of code here to specify different parameters and things like that and make sure they get processed correctly by the ETL code. Yeah, see, like here, for example. So I think I'm just going to add another test here just to make sure that that new property gets picked up correctly by Perfherder. But I'm like 99% sure that it does. And that's just like extra cleanup. It doesn't need to be done here. So I hope that was educational and not too confusing. And it gave you a little bit of a tour of some of Perfherder's back end. I don't know if it made sense. But yeah, if you have any feedback, let me know. And see you in another 6 months. Take care.